He's on the bottom left.
He's there.
Oh, he's bottom left, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Great here, this one.
Yeah, because it was difficult.
Oh, waiting.
Let us know.
Okay, we're good.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the meeting for the Anaheim Public Utilities Board. This time, the public was given the opportunity to submit public comments electronically. For the record, we have received no public comments. Next item on the agenda will be the election for the Public Utility Board Chairperson and Vice Chairperson.
I want to clarify that you're switching the order.
Yeah, just for clarification, we think it'll run smoother if we do the election for the Public Utility Board Chairperson and Vice Chairperson, and then we can proceed with the agenda. That way it's smooth. We don't have an interruption in the meeting. So with that,
Toronto, we do need to take a roll call.
oh,
See who's here.
for the attendance, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So you know,
This is a verbal roll call vote for those who are present. Board Member Guyona,
Present.
Board Member Bala, Board Member Abdulrahman,
Present.
Board Member Baraldi,
present.
Board Member Showalter, Board Member Showalter, Vice Chair Seymour,
Here.
Chair Madrano.
Here.
Hi, this is Ravneesh Bala. Sorry, I was muted. I'm here as well.
Thank you, Ravneesh.
Excellent. We have a quorum.
We do.
Okay, so as I was saying, we'll proceed to the elections for the chairperson and vice chairperson. Ms. Scott?
Thank you. This evening, the board will be electing a chairperson and a vice chairperson. The term,
So are you going to approve the minutes first before the elections? The previous meeting, the minutes for the,
We switched that so that way, once we have the chair and chairperson, we can flow through the meeting without interruptions. So
oh,
we'll do that, that'll be next.
okay, thanks.
Thank you.
as I was saying, the term of office for each position is 1 year. The PUB Rules of Practice and Procedure guide the election process. As an overview, I open the floor for elections. Any board member may make a nomination or a self-nomination. Nominations do not require a second, but the person that is nominated needs to accept the nomination. So I'm going to operate under the belief that unless advised otherwise, that the person who's been nominated accepts the nomination. Then we need a motion to close the nominations, and that motion must be seconded and voted upon. Voting is done by roll call vote, and the nominated candidates for each position are voted for in the order in which they were nominated. So I'm going to open the floor for nominations for the chairperson for fiscal year 2021.
I have a point of clarification I would like to ask,
Yes.
and that is the person I want to nominate, Ernesto Madrano, will term out at the end of this year, so he would not serve a full year term. Is that still okay?
Yes, that is acceptable.
Okay, I would like to nominate Ernesto Madrano as our chairperson for as long as he's here.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for the position of chairperson? So at this time, I am looking for a motion to jointly close the nominations and elect Ernesto Madrano as chairperson by acclamation. Do I have a second or motion? First, I need a motion.
On motion.
Second.
And at this point, Peggy, we need a roll call vote.
Okay. This is a roll call vote for item number 2, election for Public Utilities Board Chairperson. Board Member Guyona,
A big yes.
Board Member Bala,
Aye.
Board Member Abdulrahman,
Aye.
Board Member Baraldi,
Aye.
Board Member Showalter, Vice Chair Seymour,
Aye.
Chair Madrano.
Aye.
The vote is 6 ayes, 1 absent, not present. Motion carries.
Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Madrano. Next, we're moving on to the position of vice chair. And at this time, I'd like to open the nominations for vice chair.
I'd like to nominate John Seymour for vice chair.
Are there any other nominations? At this time, I'm looking for a motion to jointly close the nominations and elect Mr. Seymour as vice chairperson by acclamation.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Peggy, I need a roll call vote.
This is the roll call vote for item number 2, election for vice chairperson. Board Member Guyona,
Aye.
Board Member Bala,
Aye.
Board Member Abdulrahman,
Aye.
Board Member Baroldi,
Aye.
Board Member Showalter, Vice Chair Seymour,
Aye.
Chair Madrano.
Aye.
The vote is 6 ayes, 1 absent, not present. Motion carries.
At this time, we're going to move on to item 3 on the agenda, which is the appointment of 3 members and 1 alternate to the Public Utilities Hearing Board, and the appointment of 3 members to the Ad Hoc Legislative Working Group. As some background, the hearing board roles and responsibilities are established by the Anaheim Municipal Code and various resolutions, but in general, the hearing board is called upon to render final decisions in unresolved bill disputes or other matters requested by the PUB or the city council. 3 members are regular hearing board members, and the 4th member serves as an alternate. The legislative working group is an ad hoc group formed for the particular purpose of considering legislative and regulatory matters impacting the utility. It is not a Brown Act body and is temporary in nature. The term for each appointment is 1 year, and the appointed members serve at the chair's request unless a change is made during the course of the year. Chairperson Madrano, who are your appointments for the PUB hearing board for fiscal year 2021?
Not having received any changes here, if there's no opposition to who we have already, then you could keep those unless there's anybody that is interested in being appointed.
So as just a point of clarification, Member Showalter is not on the phone. And so if she were to be appointed and would choose not to be in that position, she would contact you and let you know. And at that time, you could appoint someone else.
That would work.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the members for the Public Utilities Hearing Board are Mr. Seymour, Mr. Abdulrahman, Ms. Showalter, and the alternate is Mr. Bahala. Okay, now moving on to the appointments for the Ad Hoc Legislative Working Group for fiscal year 2021. Would you follow the same process that you
Yes.
followed before? So those members are Mr. Madrano, Mr. Seymour, and Mr. Abdullah. At this time, I'd like to move forward to item number 4, which is the election of the 3 members of the Underground Conversion Subcommittee. The election process utilized for item number 2 applies to the election for the 3 members of the Underground Conversion Subcommittee. Unless any member of the board would like me to review the election process again, I'll open the floor for nominations for Underground Conversion Subcommittee members.
And we would need 3 members from the PUB on the subcommittee.
I would like to nominate Vincent Baraldi and Abdul Rahman and Julie Showalter.
So just as a point of clarification, since Julie's not here, if she chooses not to be a member of the Underground Conversion Subcommittee, she'll advise us of that.
And can we hold then we would hold an election following that for Dr. Seymour.
Yes.
I think she has a tough time getting to some of those meetings. I think we may want to consider another person, maybe Mr. Bala.
I would nominate Mr. Bullock.
Okay, so you withdraw your nomination.
I'm withdrawing my nomination of Commissioner Schultz.
I'll second the nomination.
I want to confirm if there's interest from Ms. Bala.
Mr. Bala, do you accept the nomination to be on the underground committee?
I would like to understand what am I committing to in terms of time, especially with the circumstances this year. So before I commit to it, I'd like to understand. So I don't know how that works.
Sure, I can provide you with a little bit more information. The underground subcommittee meets on a quarterly basis, and it's typically right before the Public Utilities Board meetings. So the start time is 3:45. It's on the 7th floor of this building. I'm sure we can accommodate a remote somebody telecommuting as the situation currently is around us. So we could do that. And then in terms of what is requested of each of the underground subcommittee members, it's reviewing presentations and other materials that are brought up regarding undergrounding projects, the program, financial matters, and discussing the direction, and then submitting projects that are of interest for undergrounding. And then those projects would then come before the board and ultimately city council for approval. So that's kind of a quick nutshell. It doesn't require a lot of time outside of the meeting in order for preparations or anything along those lines. So it really depends on your schedule. If you can commit to a meeting start time of 3:45, that would probably be one of the keys of whether or not you accept the nomination.
Okay, yeah, I think that tells me enough, and I accept that. Thank you.
All right. So at this time, I'm looking for a motion to jointly close the nominations and elect the board members Abdularam, Baraldi, and Bahala.
I move the
And-
motion.
Second.
And we need a roll call vote for this.
This is the roll call vote for item number 3 and 4. Board Member Guyona,
Aye.
Board Member Bala,
Aye.
Board Member Abdul Rahman,
Aye.
Board Member Baraldi,
Aye.
Vice Chair Seymour,
Aye.
and Chair Madrano.
Aye.
The vote is 6 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent, not present. Motion carries.
So, Mr. Chair, if you want to move back to
Back to
item.
the minutes. Okay, at this time, thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to entertain the approval of the minutes. We will have a chance to look at them. I can entertain a motion. Moved by Member Baraldi. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second from Vice Chair Seymour. Can we get a roll call vote, please, Mr. Leo?
Yes. Board, this is a roll call vote for item number 1. Board Member Guyona,
Aye.
Board Member Bala,
Aye.
Board Member Abdul Rahman,
Aye.
Board Member Baraldi,
Aye.
Vice Chair Seymour,
Aye.
and Chair Madrano.
Aye.
The vote is 6 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent, not present. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, we have a presentation on the 2020 Power Supply Summer Outlook. Mr. Lee.
Yes, thank you, sir. Every summer we come and prepare for the PUB and outlook of what our historic peak has been in the past and what we're expecting in this coming year. So Graham Bowen, if you want to introduce this item.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Doku. So I think it's certainly fair to say that over the last 4 or 5 months, COVID-19 has really changed the landscape for everyone, and APU is no exception to that. As a result of the governor's COVID-19 stay-at-home order, we've seen commercial loads drop significantly in some cases, while conversely, we've seen residential loads increase as well as part of that. So it's been a really interesting period so far. So tonight we'd like to provide the board with a summer outlook for what the load in California and Anaheim is going to look like, especially given the COVID-19 situation. Additionally, we've, as requested by board member Seymour, we've included some slides to discuss the actions we intend to take with reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in our portfolio over the next 25 years as well. So we'll see that. With that, I'd like to introduce Sean Smith. He's the Integrated Resources Manager to walk through the summer outlook. Sean and his team have been responsible for managing the APU's power supply assets and was really instrumental in developing the outlook that you're going to see before you tonight. With that, Sean.
Thank you, Graham, and good evening, PUB and Anaheim staff. If we go to slide 2, Peggy, I wanted to start with a brief review of the California energy market. The California Independent System Operator, which we call CAISO, is what Anaheim's balancing authority, and also the balancing authority for 80% of California. If you look to the right there, you'll see a large swath of California that the CAISO manages. Their 3 main functions are reliability, which we'll be talking about tonight with the summer outlook, market operations, and infrastructure planning. 3 main functions, the CAISO marketplace deals with wholesale power and brings buyers and sellers together. Anaheim procures our energy and also bids in our resources into the CAISO marketplace. If you go to the next slide, Peggy. The CAISO's summer outlook looks at the reliability during the summer where we have our highest loads. We have increased risks due to intermittent renewables and also less conventional gas-fired units. Our 2020 study that came from CAISO shows there's a low probability of shortfall. The slight risk we have is with our hydro year, which is 60% of normal. We also have increased temperatures slightly in the valley areas. However, COVID-19 has reduced loads within the CAISO, and these projections are not included in that. If you go to the next slide, we'll do a little review first on a CAISO basis and then down to the APU level. When you reviewed the CAISO from 2019, we saw very low loads. We were 15% below the projected and available generation with only 1 flex alert and no rotating outages. This was due to the mild summer. As we go to 2020, the projection looks to only have slight chance of temperatures being above normal. And then with COVID, we're looking at peaks being reduced by about 6%. While the generation, we only have about a 3,500 megawatt internal generation contingency on the CAISO. We do have 10,000 megawatts available for import, which gives us quite a cushion for that. So overall, we look very good. There is a slightly higher risk at the end of the summer season when we've used up most of the hydro and wildfire risks increase. If you go to the next slide, Peggy, we now have the APU look. We actually were very good in projecting our peak for last year in 2019. We projected a peak of 537 and we came in at 534. That occurred after a 4-day heat wave of temperatures of 100 degrees. And that's when you'll usually see a peak happen where day after day it's hot and some people that didn't turn on their air conditioning would finally turn on their air conditioning. Also, we had no major resource outages and no rolling blackouts or anything from last year. For 2020, we look to have plenty of availability of resources. We've got 647 megawatts available. With COVID adjustments, we're down to about a 492 megawatt peak because businesses are slow to ramp up and we've seen that second wave in COVID. If you go to the next page, Peggy, turning to the fire recap for 2019, We saw about 7,800 fires, which only encompassed about 260,000 acres. This is well below our 5-year average, but you shouldn't take that as a prediction of what will happen in 2020. You can see it's highly variable year to year, and the risks are still out there, so we have to plan for wildfires. While you go to the next page, you'll see what we do for wildfire prevention. You may have heard in the news, just like last year, what's called public safety power shutoff. I know everything's COVID and it may not have made the news as much as last year, but it's still an issue. In 2019, we saw 22 outages across the state due to mainly issues in the mountains. The potential impact, however, on APU is quite low. We have a diversified internal and external portfolio. We have multiple connections to our regional grid, so we can rely on any one of those to maintain the power within the city. However, even with all those, we still plan ahead. We've got cameras, undergrounding, and system hardening that we take very seriously here at APU. When you go to the next page, some of the emergency events that can occur are natural gas curtailments, prolonged heat waves, wildfires or natural disasters, and loss of large generation and transmission assets. So the CAISO is responsible for balancing these supplies and demands and preventing cascading outages. Generation and imports allow for us to handle any of these issues that come up. And you've seen from the previous slides that we have quite a bit of extra supplies there. Internally, we look to demand response programs to lower the load side of the equation on these hot days. And in the very last resort, we could go to rotating outages if we need it, but that is an absolute last resort. Next page, we have our matrix of ensuring our grid reliability. And we've gone through what CAISO and utility does during one of these emergencies. They're going to maximize the imported power, and they're going to coordinate with gas and all the utilities in the state and deploy market-based demand response. And again, as last resorts, they go to rotating outages. On the next page, we can talk about customer load reduction that Anaheim plans ahead for. So when we go to the next page, we look what we do on a day. What happens regionally, there are flex alerts and the public's asked to reduce their power demand. Anaheim itself goes out and issues text messaging, reverse 911, social media posts. And also internally, what we do is we've already coordinated with police, fire and rescue, public works and traffic and other groups to make sure everyone knows when and if there are these alert notices and rotating outages. If you go to the next page now, our internal demand response program has over 11 megawatts of resources available, split up between our large customer volunteers, our city facilities, and also residential demand. As we look to the future and technology comes down in price and becomes more sophisticated, we will always look into market demand response energy storage. And as EVs become more important, we'll look to be able to curtail those loads when and if they are economic. Now, page 12, this is what we talked about with the PUB requesting what was in our power to reduce on GHG reductions. And so we made this chart and showed how by 2045, we've got to go down to basically zero carbon. And you'll see our contract with IPP officially ends in 2027. So in 2030, the coal and / gas unit will be gas units in 2025, drop significantly our GHG. Finally, by 2045, Canyon and Magnolia will come off the books as carbon emitting resources. It should be noted that both of those times, we'll be looking at resources and we'll do technology assessment to replace with either solar, wind, geothermal, renewable natural gas, hydrogen, or any other technology that looks like it's commercially viable at that time. What we've learned from solar and energy storage, you'll see later on, is you really have to watch the market. Costs can dramatically drop, and you want the market resources you pick to be mature. If I go to the next page, one thing we want to also, beyond just generation resources, we want to identify energy efficiency and transportation electrification as increasingly important as we go out to 2045. EE, as energy efficiency is called, we currently have programs in income qualified, schools, and commercial and residential. TE, we have EV charger rebates, and we're in the planning process for launching a number of other programs. And finally, the last page here, Anaheim does look fully resourced to meet local needs this summer. We are prepared to minimize impacts of any transmission or generation outages caused by wildfires or other emergencies. CAISO and utilities are coordinating efforts to mitigate any of these risks. And finally, in the midterm, GHG reductions will continue to pose an operational challenge, but longer term, we believe we can overcome all these issues. And thank you. That's, if we go to the next page, if there are any questions, we can field those.
One comment I wanted to make before questions is while loads are down now in terms of a lot of business, there could be a potential. So if you remember back to the San Diego blackout that happened, that was one of the photos on the slides, is it was because the transmission line basically was down and it caused this cascading effect that terminated basically where Songs is right now. So anything south of Songs was pretty much shut down and in blackout for a period of time. So that's why we go through these exercises, even though the likelihood may not be high that something could happen, the potential is, and the ramifications of that are incredibly high. So we want to make sure that our folks, that's why we do this every year. We coordinate with traffic, police, fire, do these exercises with them and talk through these issues so that it's a good reminder that if something happens, we don't want to be looking at each other and trying to figure out what to do. We want to be in the position of, okay, we know exactly what to do, what resources to call on, how to utilize the different assets that we have. So just wanted to remind the board that that's why we do this every year.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members of the board?
I have one
Oh,
question.
Mr. Seymour.
Yes, on the slide that shows demand response and residential air conditioning demand response, how do we achieve that?
Go ahead, Sean. You want to start?
We have a program that we send out mailers for and solicit customers to join the program. And then on those days that we have these events, we call on them to reduce their air conditioning load.
Okay, so they volunteer, and if they get a call, then they'll turn off the air conditioning.
So there's different types of programs. So I participate in the program in Edison service territory at my house, and there's different levels, but essentially you give control of your air conditioning system to the utility, and they can send out a signal and it will shut things down. The issue, while it gives you the greatest demand reduction, the problem that it causes is you may have something where it's, you have a party going on or whatever the circumstances where you really don't want it to be shut off now. And it becomes harder. Well, you do these opt-outs and it gets a little bit more convoluted. So ours is actually an opt-in where we give you the signal. We say, here's an event. It's going to be roughly from this time to this time. And then somebody can go in and then on the back end, we verify it with the meter and say, okay, you participated, and then you will get a credit on your bill. So it's a slightly different way to approach it where it's a little bit more customer friendly to give people the ability to opt in. And then we'll do test messages and things once in a while, but that's how that program.
Thank you.
Couple just quick questions. One about yeah, forecast demand. I understand businesses have slowed down, especially some large users. But everyone's home and it looks like kids are going to be at home over the summer. We taken into consideration that there will be a peak demand at some point when it gets hot, August, September, when everyone finally says we have to turn on the AC. And rather than being at an office or a school during the heat of the day, where everyone's sitting in a small room, now you have 100,000 home air conditioning units peaking at that time.
Right. So let me start with that and then Sean can kind of chime in. But I think because our demand profile for electricity is heavily weighted towards commercial industrial, where we get about 75% of our revenue from businesses who operate. And when you think about businesses using 10,000 to 20,000 times more than house, it kind of gives you kind of a scale of why we think that our demands are going to be a little bit more depressed than if just the residents were affected.
Yeah, but not every business is shut down. They might not be using as much energy.
Correct.
And now if you scale up, that's my question there.
Right.
And then do we have any concerns about COVID? Are we deferring any kind of maintenance? And also, we looked at like cyber threats and stuff like that effect?
Yes.
With all
So
the telecommuting.
So Sean, I'm going to come back to you on his first question, but let me try to address the other ones. In terms of maintenance, we have not deferred anything that's critical, anything that's substantive where it's going to cause, for example, a substation where we think that there could be a degradation of something, and if we don't do something, it's going to cause an issue. We have not touched any of those types of projects. It's really the ones where we feel like there's a little bit more time that we can take. So crew quarters, sustainability center, energy storage that we're going to be talking about, where it's not we need it immediately. Those types of things have been pushed out and deferred, not canceled. Cybersecurity, yes, we do look at cybersecurity very seriously, both as an industry and individually as utilities. So as we've explained to the board in the past, we have all these firewalls that are built in to prevent any type of hack that goes into, especially our electric SCADA system. That one's very critical because you could be, potentially somebody could be turning on switches affecting customers. So because we're completely separated from the city's network, we feel that we have a little bit more protection in place. Those things are constantly tested and evaluated to make sure. I can't even remote into the SCADA system myself. There's only a handful of people who have that ability. Now let me go back to the question about demand. Sean, can you talk a little bit about how the reductions are looking based on your modeling?
Yeah, so the modeling, we did include that on page 5, and that was when we looked at, businesses versus, we do understand that residential's load will go up, but like Dooku said, the load from commercial is so much higher. We are projecting about a 30 megawatt hit from that. And even with that, if you see that drops us down into the 492 megawatt peak, we're still resourced up to 647 megawatts. So even if we have a little surprise there on extremely hot days, we're well resourced and well positioned to meet any demand that you speak of in terms of that type of heat. The risk there would be more of what Dooku is alluding to in the fact of a cascading outage, on a large transmission lines.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anybody, hearing no questions, then we'll proceed. Item number 6 is the energy storage plan determination of Assembly Bill 2514 procurement targets, and this is a item for action.
Yeah, so there's a presentation that we have as well as an action request. So this is a compliance item where we have to make this report and show what we're projecting in terms of storage. And there's actually a lot of synergy. So we wanted to pair this presentation with what we just showed you, because there's going to be some longer term impacts into how we start to incorporate storage into our power supply portfolio. So with that, Grant, you want to introduce this item?
Yeah, sure. Let me tee this up for everybody. So it's been about 10 years since Assembly Bill 2514 was enacted in the California State Legislature. And that bill every 3 years requires electric utilities, including Anaheim essentially, to determine the efficacy of energy storage systems in its territory, with the caveat that the utility gets to set targets only if it's cost effective to do so. If it's not cost effective, we will not set targets. So the bill requires us to report those findings and determinations to the California Energy Commission for review. And like Duka said before you tonight is the latest findings we had from the report in 2017, and also talking about the new report. So since 2017, there's been many things that have changed. Obviously, energy storage has taken off widely throughout the state of California, especially. Prices have also dropped dramatically for energy storage. And of course, we've had the Kramer decommissioning that occurred in 2019 as well. So tonight we'll be discussing APU's updated targets and future needs for energy storage. And we'll also be seeking your approval for the updated targets to submit to the City Council and the California Energy Commission. So with that, let me turn it back to Sean to provide you some more details of our plan and our new targets. Sean.
Thank you again. It's an interesting evening for me. So this is the fun stuff I get to do in planning of energy storage systems. So on slide 2, Peggy, what we're going to talk about is a little bit of the energy storage system history. So various technologies such as batteries and water pump storage store energy for later use on the grid. Battery-based systems are now being used by utilities because they're becoming economically viable. And currently to date, we have over 500 megawatts available on the grid in California and many more to come. If you go to 2, as we looked out towards or page 3, sorry, Maggie. Page 3 talks about our future needs. Now, energy storage is needed to balance out the oversupply of intermittent renewables, specifically solar and wind, obviously. And if you look down on this chart on the right, you've probably seen this in a number of PUBs. All that solar energy produced during the day, middle of the day, what that does is severely depresses prices and requires 2 ramps, both in morning and evening peak. Battery systems are well set up for that and for those 2 ramps, and also capture those pricing increases, because you will even see negative pricing during the springtime when there's large water flows from dams and also a lot of solar on the grid. If I go to the next page, we started to research this, and what we've come up with through hiring outside consultants and internal reviews is looking at 50 megawatts of storage, which is about 10% of our peak. Right now, short duration, 2-hour discharge provide the best value. Best value means the most income from the CAISO market, and also looking at that in terms of cost and also capability of the energy storage devices. Further, they also allow us to scale up. So you can buy 2 hours now of 50 megawatts, and then as prices increase, you can also add storage to that as prices decrease. As long as you set up the systems correctly, you can just keep adding. Two potential configurations we see out there are standalone energy storage and also what's called hybrid. So that's where on the same site, they have co-located solar plus energy storage through one interconnection. There are a couple of different ways you can contract for these. There is direct install, which is usually done within Anaheim, and then also power purchase agreements, which could be done within Anaheim or outside of Anaheim. If we go to the next page, we hired an outside consultant to look at these costs and look at these revenues. And what you see on the right-hand side is the 1, 2, and 3 hour 50 megawatt battery range. They range in price from $30 to $70 million, and their paybacks are quite attractive, 3 to 5 years. It should be noted the 1 hour is tough to actually implement because the batteries are really not set up to charge and discharge that much, and it really hits the equipment hard. And so that's one of the reasons you want to focus on the 2 hour, where it still gives you a very good return and a quick payback but it allows you to also grow beyond the 2 hours. You can add hours to a 2-hour battery. This consultant also determined that direct installation generate approximately 20 to 37% more dollars compared to a PPA. We also expect to go, when we go out for an RFP, by the time we do that, the prices will drop again and again. One of the reasons we've been a little bit delayed, obviously, is with COVID. You see the pricing there. We had to put this project on pause. So if I go to the next page, what we have come up with is basically a pros and cons of direct install versus power purchase agreements, or PPAs. Basically though, direct install, like I said, you get nicer returns. You have a little more risk in terms of setting up the units, managing them, but our internal staff gets more experience. And then you also do have to add in the dollars for decommissioning responsibilities. On the power purchase agreement, you look at a much simpler project management structure where the third party handles basically everything for the battery, and all you're doing is taking the economic benefits and marketing it into the CAISO. Obviously, in that circumstance, there are less financial benefits because that developer needs to price in their profit. When we plan to issue the RFP, we're going to go out for both options. So at that time, we can compare the different technology options, the market rates, the risk terms, and whether we are pairing them with solar. And we also want to look at vendor experience, because someone that does a design build could be much different than a person you're getting a PPA from. If I go to the next page, Graham, I'm not going to touch too much on this. Graham went quite a bit through this, but it should be noted, this again started in 2010. And in every 3 years, we've got to look at this. In 2014, we found batteries too expensive and technology not really built out and set up yet. So in 2017, we went out with a goal of a 1 megawatt pilot project and up to 10 megawatts in 2026. What we're recommending now is eliminating the 1 megawatt pilot and going straight to the 50 megawatt product. And I'll get into reasons why in the next coming slides. One of the reasons is, next slide, Peggy, is this price curve over the last 10 years is dramatic. We are talking close to $1,200 a kilowatt hour, 85% drop to now we're looking at under $200. Revenue opportunities, we're in a really critical area right now. We've seen these prices drop, and because of that, a lot of batteries are going to be going into CAISO. So we've got to time it properly, because we know revenues will also go down, but we will run those numbers when the time comes for the RFP. Next slide. Our recommendation tonight then is for 2021 is 0 megawatts. Energy storage continued to mature with those prices declining as we've seen in the previous slide. Wholesale energy prices are becoming increasingly volatile, and the 1 megawatt proof of concept pilot project is no longer required. The economies of scale are there, and the market is quite established now. We know what to do. Lots of people have experience, and we can hire those types of people. Further, we want to go up to 50 megawatts by 2026. And that can be through one or more projects. And we're still evaluating, as I talked about previously, an own versus lease. If we have a project that we're doing internally, a build to suit, we have identified some potential sites. We have some sites next to substations, and Canyon Power Plant also has some open space. So there are locations. The batteries don't take up as much space as large solar fields or large gas generation plants. You can fit a lot more megawatts in a smaller area there. And that's all I have. If we have questions, let me know.
Well, when we started talking about solar back when, and it was not feasible, it was not cost feasible, and that's why our first recommendation is do nothing. And over the last 10 years or so, what we've seen is you've seen that price curve drop, and now there's a lot of systems out there. The large industrial utilities have them. Now several munis have them as well. So we feel more comfortable that we don't need to do a proof of concept anymore. We've done projects, and so now we're like, okay, so how do we get the best value? That's really the concern. And so that's what Sean presented to you with the numbers.
Are there any questions from members of the board?
Yes. Yeah, this is Abby.
Hi.
My question here is the discharge time. The discharge time, which is like 2-hour discharge time, is the discharge time is going to be steady at, say for instance, at 2026 is 50 megawatt. It's going to be 50 megawatt throughout the 2 hours, or it's going to be declined until the end of the 2 hours?
Do you want me to take that, Dooku?
Yeah,
or-
Sean, if you could answer that, that'd be great.
Sure. So the way these systems are set up is if you bid it into the CAISO market and they take control and run it the way is most economical and gets you the best value in the market. If you needed to run it for 2 hours straight, you can absolutely do that. When you contract for these products, they include the degradation of the battery in it. So there are two structures there. They either put more than the 50 megawatt 2 hours of batteries there and degrade to that, or they come out and replace cells. You can have two different methods, and it depends on what vendor you select. But the specification is it will run 2 hours straight at 50 megawatts. Currently, in the CAISO market, the most valuable is actually what's called regulation, where the CAISO takes control and actually ramps up and down your unit. So the system itself, the CAISO grid, is balanced properly, and they pay you the most for that currently. The market may change by the time we put this in, but that's where the current revenue opportunity is for batteries.
Yes, that looks good. If that's the way how it's managed by Casio. And also, if we need to expand the discharge time, can we make it 4 hours by having 2 units
Yes.
sitting
So-
together and then? Right.
If you look on the page where it shows the question, see, that's one model where it shows those containers. So those containers represent certain batteries, and what happens if you select a particular vendor that is a storage container type battery, you just add more containers as you need them. So you put that in that specification that you want that. I want to add another hour 2 years from now, another hour 2 years from now. So that we definitely, when we're looking for space within Anaheim, we're looking not only for the 2 hour, we're saying, can we get to 4 hours in this location?
Exactly.
So I'll add to that, AB, which is if we wanted to expand at a site, if we have a location, let's just say, for example, Canyon, when we do all of the infrastructure, we'd probably do it for the max build out, but perhaps only equip it for a certain number at this time. And that way we could add more, as Sean was saying. So that's one way of expansion. The second way of expansion is a multiple site. So we do something perhaps at Canyon, then something perhaps at another location. And so that you can increase your fleet of storage that way. So we're looking at both of those models and looking at multiple sites because of that very issue. So you bring up a good point, AD.
Thank you.
Just to add one more thing to that, Amy, for you. Because these are modular as well, if we need to pull them out and move them for whatever reason, they've passed their lifetime, it's easy to pull these out. There's not a decommissioning process involved in things like that because it's not a set infrastructure. So there's a lot of benefits to getting the modular style batteries. As we've looked at, they're self-contained. They have their own air conditioning systems, their own fire extinguishing systems. Everything's self-contained. So it makes it a better deal for us when we look at these kinds of systems.
Perfect. This is very promising.
I think it's a fantastic plan. I really do. And I like the fact that we're not, leading the charge because it is that price, I think, is going to continue to come down as you've discussed. And just out of curiosity, just each of these shipping container units, what does like one standard shipping container represent as far as like just out of space? So how many megawatts does one container?
So
Correct.
what I've seen in the past is about 1 megawatt per shipping container. So if you're doing 50 of these, potentially 50 of these, but that density is improving as well. So what is it now, Sean? Is it still about 1 megawatt per shipping container?
Yeah, so you can, like on a 1 acre plot, we could get, it depends on the manufacturer, but in a 1 acre plot, we can get almost a 50 megawatt 4-hour battery. So, and certain other manufacturers are even, as Dooku spoke about, the energy density is getting better and better, where you can even get more out of that. But that's what we're looking at.
Just out of curiosity as well, to that end, because they're shipping containers, are they stackable?
Yes, what we want to look at is, one, we're in an earthquake area, so we have to make sure it gets shored and protected
Have
accordingly.
you been to the Port of Los Angeles?
Yes. And then the other thing is that,
Yeah,
so because there is, you want to make sure there's proper, yes. So we would look at that, and that's potential. I think for our first start, we probably not want to stack immediately, but that potential remains there. Yes, no question.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
Doing the direct, who maintains these systems?
Yeah, so there's two models. One is we treat it almost like a substation. We currently have electric substations, and there's batteries there too. And of course, it's much smaller scale, really meant to back up the electronic systems within the substation. So our staff currently maintains batteries. So we would develop that expertise and let our substation staff more than likely maintain these if it was a direct install type of a system. If we choose to do a power purchase agreement, then all of that maintenance, of course, would fall on the vendor.
I like the direct.
Yeah, I mean, from a financial standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. But I think what's smart is let's look at both and see what we get back from the market. And let that kind of dictate
I
how.
totally agree. I also think it's good for our employees to start learning all of these skills.
Absolutely.
This is, even though we do have small strings of batteries, I think this is a whole different deal.
It's a different deal, and I would say good for employees on two fronts. We want the operation side of the house where the maintenance and that type of thing is taking place, but also how do you dispatch it for the best economic gain? And that's where Sean's staff has to try to figure out, okay, what's the best way for us to take this 4 hours and do the load following, the direct, all these types of things to maximize the return on investment. So our focus is really important.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I just want to add last questions. We spoke before about the discharge time. What about the charge time? If you want to charge it, how long it takes to charge and to maintain the 50 megawatt?
It's roughly, and it's getting better and better, but say a 4-hour battery roughly takes 5 hours to charge. Again, in that ancillary service market, there are times when you get paid to charge the battery. So again, the CAISO market's balancing that, but as you've seen that solar curve, there are a lot of dips both in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day, where charging becomes very inexpensive, if not a profit-making endeavor.
So can you imagine that? You may be charging your batteries in the middle of the day because there's a lot of solar.
Oh, yeah.
Negative market prices.
And the last thing, just from a location perspective, we have assets outside of the city of Anaheim. Could we locate them at, I mean, who cares where they're located? It's a battery. Could they be located to like Bowerman, or could they be located at one of our solar facilities?
We would have to negotiate that with the entity that we're partnering with. So that's obviously something that's doable. I'm positive that there's developers looking at all of those projects right now and trying to figure out what's the maximum they can develop as a profit in that respect. So I think the interesting thing there is if we have a PPA existing with the landfill location or something like that, it'd be hard to do a direct install there. So more than likely, we'd have to do another power purchase agreement So those are the things that we look at. And in addition to what your pricing schedule is, we'd say, what's your location? And from the vendors. So this is really interesting. I think we're at a time where the market is very different than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And now it's an opportune time for us to invest in something.
Any other questions from the board? Seeing and hearing none, I'll entertain a
One more.
Oh,
We got one more.
question. Howard?
Sean, did you have something or?
No, somebody on the board's waving their hand.
Ramesh.
Oh, Ravneesh.
Ravneesh.
All right.
Arabella? You hear us? Oh,
He's on mute.
could you unmute yourself? Is he?
He looks like he's unmuted, but
He's unmuted.
yeah, we're still not hearing.
Can you type the question in chat, maybe?
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, yeah. now we
Yes.
can.
There we go.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I've been raising my hand and talking, and I was not even on mute, but apparently something went wrong. My apologies. I have a quick question. So I know that we chose not to go the 1 megawatt pilot project route, and we said the industry is mature, and the product density and cost and everything is going in favor. So let's just go ahead and do it. 50 meg by 2026. What are the proposed milestones? Are we just going to drop 150 meg project, or are we going to have a 10 meg and then add to it over a period of time? And what do the timelines look like?
Good question. So let me start, Sean, and then you can help me fill in. But
Sure.
right now, it would be a project, a single project for 50 megawatts, more than likely at one site. Now, if somebody comes in with a proposal that's different than that and it's more cost effective at multiple sites, we can certainly look at that. But I think with our first, jump into storage, we'd like it to be one location where we have direct control over dispatching that 50 megawatts directly from Sean's group. So that's kind of where we are right now. I don't think we break it up into 5, 10 megawatt projects necessarily. And I think the economies of scale in terms of construction, project management, site management, and all of those things, what we're anticipating is the 50 megawatt single project would be that for us. So again, we're open to what the market comes back. That's why we're doing a request for proposals, and that may dictate, a different approach. But from what we're seeing in the market right now, it looks like one project would do the trick.
Okay, thank you.
Are there
I
any
would
other
only
questions?
add, we would come out of the gate at 2 hours too, unless the economics came back different.
Are there any questions? If none, then I will entertain a motion to adopt the energy storage plan.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Seymour, seconded by Member Baroldi. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
This is a roll call vote for item number 6. Board Member Guyona,
Aye.
Board Member Bala,
Aye.
Board Member Abdul Rahman,
Aye.
Board Member Baroldi,
Aye.
Vice Chair Seymour,
Aye.
Chair Madrano.
Aye.
The vote is 6 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent, not present. Motion carries.
Thank you. We have another action item, the approval and authorization of the fiscal year 2019, 2020 net write-off of uncollectible utility accounts.
Hey,
Lee.
Mr. Bueller, would you like to take this one?
Sure. Thank you, Dooku. Mr. Chair, members of the board. This is an item that we bring before you every year to request approval to write off those debts that we deem uncollectible. As you noticed in attachment 1 of the staff report, we're proposing to write off about 0.15% of our total revenue, which totals $783,531, which is about half of the industry standard for write-offs in the utility industry. Industry standard runs about 0.33%. Now, it does seem a little bit low considering that we're in the middle of a global pandemic with a financial crisis coupled on top of that. And it is because most of this activity occurred before the shelter-at-home orders came from the governor. So we will see a significant increase, I'm sure, next year on the write-off. So I'm pleased to report that this year's write-off is relatively low. However, it does not portend for any kind of future, low write-off. Kind of give you some context of what we're seeing this year to give context to how low this write-off is. Right now, our receivables that we have on the books have increased by about 39% since the shelter-at-home orders took place. These are people that have been residents and businesses have been unable to pay their bills. We're working with them as closely as we can. We're not shutting anybody off right now. However, when the pandemic ends and when shelter-at-home orders end, we do have in place processes and procedures to assist those customers as robustly as we can. Payment plans that can extend far beyond the 12 months that we typically offer our customers. We will work with them on their balances in any way we can, extending the payment plans, et cetera, because the last thing we need is to be another albatross around their neck as they're fighting through all of the other issues that our customers are going to be facing, rent collections, mortgage collections, et cetera. So I just want to make sure you are aware that when we come forward next fiscal year with this request, that it could be markedly higher, possibly double or higher what our typical write-off is. But it is important to note that of an organization with a budget of $600 million, a write-off, even if it's doubled, won't significantly financially impact the agency. That is something people are concerned about. It's not really a significant amount of money for us. It's more a customer-friendly posture that we need to continue to take for our customers. Just because we write off the $783,000 doesn't necessarily mean the debt goes away. This debt then goes on to collection agencies, or our own credit collection team tries to recoup this money. For instance, when customers move back to Anaheim and they owe us money from previous years' past debts, we then are forced to collect the previous debts from those customers before we agree to turn on service. So in the staff report, you'll see that we did collect this year about $158,000 from such customers. So that's why we have a net write-off of $783,000 when it gross was $942,000. There was one large customer that we did write off about $138,000. So of this amount, $138,000 is from one customer. This tends to happen from time to time. Several years ago, when the register went bankrupt, we did have a large write-off from the register. So when large customers go under, we do tend to have a big bath, if you will, event that we write off a significant amount. So things we're concerned about going forward are our receivables are going up. We're also concerned about bankruptcies, large customer bankruptcies. So we're continually looking at our deposits, customers that are showing distress, if we need to change our deposits from those customers, et cetera, to actually protect the agency from large write-offs going forward. So with that, if I be prepared to answer any questions you may have, but we are requesting the recommendation to City Council that we write off $783,531 for fiscal year 2020.
I just wanted to add one thing to what Brian said, is that part of the CARES Act that the federal government approved is something called LIHEAP. It's a low-income program that's specifically for electric bills, and they added another $900 million into the pot that they typically collect. So after that gets apportioned out, we don't have a specific number for Orange County, but we think it's substantially more than we typically do. So we do typically about $600,000 or so a year. So that's one of the resources that we suggest to customers. Say, take advantage of this. This is available for you. If you meet the income qualifications, then this is assistance that could really help knock the significant amount off of amounts due. So it's been very helpful.
Right. And if you recall, we did also increase our emergency assistance program to help customers going forward. That is being used as we speak. So customers that are having trouble with their bills, we do have additional funds that we've allocated to help those customers right now. However, we are seeing continued stress amongst our customers. Right now, just as of today, we have about 50,000 residential customers that are past due on their bills out of 100,000. So that gives you context of what we're looking at.
Are there any questions? If there are no questions, then I'll entertain a motion
I'll move a
to
motion.
accept the net write-off of the uncollectible utility account. Motion made by member Abdul Rahman.
Yes.
Can I get a second?
I second it.
Second from member Bala. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
This is a roll call vote for item number 7. Board Member Gaona,
Aye.
Board Member Bala,
Aye.
Board Member Abdul Rahman,
Aye.
Board Member Veroldi,
Aye.
Vice Chair Seymour,
Aye.
Chair Madrano.
Aye.
The vote is 6 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent, not present. Motion carries.
Great, thank you. The next item on the agenda, the quarterly status reports on capital improvement projects, master agreements, general services agreements, and spot bid awards for the quarter ending June 30 of 2020.
Okay.
Lee?
So on this one, there's 2 reports in front of you. I'm going to have Michael and Janet talk about the CIP. But the other one that talks about the use of spot bids and consultants and contractors, you can see some of the numbers there. One thing that I think we've added is we've gotten safety services and environmental services agreements. So those agreements were recently approved. And so now we've included that into the report so you can see anytime we exercise those, what those numbers come out to. In terms of the spot bids, you see the significantly reduced numbers, and it doesn't mean we're doing less projects. It means that we have very large solicitations that we do for materials and equipment, and then it gets portioned off depending on who has the best terms and pricing. And then we're also doing things, multi-year agreements that we can go straight to city council, and they would see something like, for example, transformers, big switches or something like that, multi-years. So that's why the dollar amounts look lower than typical. And with that, I'm going to ask, let me start with Janet on the CIP, and then we can go to Michael thereafter.
Sure, Dooku. Thank you. And board members, if you refer to in your packet, you have the electric capital improvement dashboard in front of you, and it kind of gives you an overall view of how we did in expenditures as compared to our budget. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. Part of it to address a point that was raised by board member Baroli on how are we doing as far as getting our projects completed, and amid the COVID shutdown and whatnot. And some of those things you can see in underground conversion, what may look like we have underspent for the budget year. Those actually, the number of the 42.7 million includes encumbrances. A lot of those underground conversion projects, as you know, are multi-year projects. So we encumber the entire cost of the project in the beginning. And so that encumbrances for those underground conversion projects include encumbrances for Beach Boulevard, for Eucalyptus, and for the phase 2 of our Santa Ana Canyon Road underground conversion. So it's not, those in itself total $27 million. So it's we've hit our mark, our milestones on completions of our underground conversion projects to date. But it does look like it's underspent because of those encumbrances. So I just wanted to point that out to the board. Also in the area of reliability, we have about $500,000 of encumbrances, but we also have about $4 million in carryovers from year to year for continuing our advanced metering deployment. And so again, it's not underspent, it's a multi-year project, multi-year project that was reflected in the budget.
We can see from the back pages, we just kind of highlight a few of our projects there, some of our street lighting before and after pictures. And also we continue on with the direct buried cable replacement. Amid COVID, just our field crews have been working as usual under normal circumstances as essential workers. So they've been here every day, as our contractors have as well. And so we have not seen a slowdown at this point, fortunately. And we have had a very minimal impact of COVID cases to our staff. So we've been very fortunate in those areas. If there's any questions, I'd like to entertain those before Michael continues on with the water side.
So let me say one thing on the energy generation project. You see that there's very little spent out of that 4.1 that was, and this is the Solar for Schools program. So you asked, like, have we deferred things? We've deferred that one because it's not a critical project. It doesn't really affect the system per se. And so we'd like to continue that program, but we're just pushing it off at least a year, and then we'll kind of reassess and see. So we're doing things like that.
Just one question. Is there any area here where we're actually behind and not get done what we wanted to get done?
Janet, do you have like a
Yeah,
specific?
I can address that, Board Member Seymour. I think what we'll see is in the next quarterly report or in the next budget year, where we may see some impacts in regards to some of the direct buried cable replacement, because it does involve a long outage at times during those projects. And of course, we've wanted to defer that in the midst of COVID for the convenience of our customers, and having a large outage at that time during that spring and up to date up to now has been something we have tried to defer amidst trying to keep the customers as convenient as possible. So we may see a delay in the start of direct buried cable replacement, but I can see that would be about the only area where we may be deferring a little bit of work, and only for a few months.
Yes, I think that's a good plan because kids are going to be going to school.
Yeah.
Through the internet, and people are going to be working from home. And they would not like to have their power shut down for a long time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we work very closely with both residential and commercial customers. Commercial customers, we have had instances where we've had to cancel the planned outage because of a convenience or a request from them. For residents, of course, we do everything we possibly can up to the point where it requires the outage. So we do all of the groundwork, we do all of the cutovers up to the point where we actually have to turn the power off just to cut the customer over. So we do it in a very planned fashion to minimize the outages, because we are very aware of the impact families, residents, even commercial customers have had in these challenging times. So we're doing our best.
One interesting thing is direct buried cable projects, typically you do the businesses, the cutovers at night, and then you do the residents during the day, because most of the time people are home. So obviously that's not the case. And so that's what Janet's referring to, is how can we try to figure out things without impacting service reliability, but still, allowing them to have power continuity. So
Thank you.
I have a quick question. There's one thing that says customer expansion. Actually, that's the only one that we've spent more than budgeted. What does that mean, customer expansion?
So customer expansion is new service requests. So if a new business comes in, a new hotel, where we actually lay out a service plan to provide electric service, new electric service, then we are reimbursed for those costs by the customer for the infrastructure that is put in and the work involved to connect that electric service. So there's times, again, that it may straddle a fiscal year. And so a customer may reimburse us in a fiscal year that's subsequent to when we actually did the work. So there may be at times where we receive reimbursement for a project we completed the previous fiscal year.
So let me add on to that, Ravneesh, which is this is, I'd say about 80% of those costs are reimbursed by customers. So this could be, like Janet mentioned, hotel, condo development, what have you. The 20%, what happens with that? Usually when we're doing a project and we see, hey, you know, there's a old something here or upstream, there's another issue there. You can't directly attribute that cost to the customer who's asking for the service upgrade. But it's part of our system, and it makes sense if we're going to be touching it and having an outage, let's do the whole thing at once. So that's why I say about 80% of those costs are reimbursed through developers.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Then maybe we can go to water, Michael?
Yeah, and right behind the water or the electric dashboard is the Water Capital Improvement Program dashboard. So if you look on the front page of that, in the upper left-hand corner, you can see that the budgeted and cash expenditures was at 56.4 million, of which we spent and encumbered about half of that. And so that was for last fiscal year. And the main reason why it is underspent by about 50% is the main reason is because earlier in the year, when we got our notice of shutting down our wells for PFAS, and we were doing the rate adjustment, that we decided to cancel the Anaheim South Recycle Water Project and reallocate that towards the treatment plants that we would be putting in to restore our groundwater supply. So that's the main reason why it was underspent. We do have a number of pipeline projects that we are moving forward with for this new fiscal year that we just started. So if you look down under where it says 55 projects and that we're working on currently, that's a large number of projects for our project management team, 30 of which are in the design phase. We just kicked off a whole lot of new pipeline designs, and that really is needed to help keep our water reliability to our customers and water quality to our customers too, by replacing that aging infrastructure that's underground that we don't see. Just one project I wanted to highlight on the back of that. There's 3 photos, and that's the one at the top. You've heard us talk about this for the past couple years of the Lanane Water Treatment Plant rehabilitation project. So it is all the construction is done up there. They're doing their what we call their punch list, items that our inspectors have identified that they need to go back and do. They'll be working on that for the next few weeks, maybe month. And then that project will be 100% complete, and the contractor will have moved off. So really glad we had a good contractor up there. Everything worked out well, and made that plant not only more reliable, but also expanded the capacity of the plant from 15 million gallons per day capacity. Now it can do 20 million gallons per day. And we've already utilized that because our second cheapest source of water supply is the water from the Lanane Water Treatment Plant. And now that a lot of our wells are offline, we're maximizing that. So we did just on last Saturday produce 17.5 million gallons per day out of that plant. So we're already using the new capacity that we needed from that plant. And if there's any questions on our capital improvement program, I'm glad to answer them.
One thing I wanted to add to what Michael said is we were planning on doing a dedication for Lanane. It's a big project, $20 million project. It is a big project, a huge undertaking. And so we wanted to celebrate the milestone, but obviously during this time, it doesn't make sense for us to do a gathering. So we're gonna try to figure out what could we do to be sensitive, but also to be safe. So hopefully we could do something at some point to recognize, because we do have a plaque that we have prepared, which has board members' names on it, council members' names on it, etc. If you would like a tour of Lanane, we can set something up. And so if you just let Peggy know, if you're interested, then we can do kind of a specialized tour for board members, work within your schedule. And then Mike and the plant folks up there can kind of show you around and at least talk about the project. And hopefully we could do the dedication later on. But if that's of interest to you, then please contact Peggy.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Water CIP, no questions. Next item on the agenda, the update on electric system issues. Ms. Laniker?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so my first update, I have 2 updates. The first one, going back to the April PUB meeting, following the presentation of the Anaheim Public Utilities 2020 Wildfire Mitigation Plan. At that time, Board Member Seymour had requested a follow-up by staff on the recommendation made by the independent evaluator, which was to provide a written safety and operational procedures for limiting operational activities, followed by staff training as best practice, and that it should be completed before the start of the fire season. And at that time, we gave Board Member Seymour an estimate of having those written procedures completed by June. So I'm happy to report that staff has completed those written procedures. They're known as directives for system operators, specifically for the operation of distribution circuits in fire threat zones. So those procedures include red flag warning and extreme Santa Ana wind index notifications, prioritizing repairs of hazards identified during patrols and inspections, such as broken cross arms or damaged insulators, and patrolling an overhead line that traverses through a fire threat zone before re-energizing the circuit. So those are some of the procedures that are in this directive. System operators have reviewed those procedures with the chief operator, and now this training will be included in the annual training conducted for overall wildfire prevention. So we have completed that task, Board Member Seymour.
Thank you.
Any questions on that? If not, second update I have is on our wildfire cameras. We completed the installation of the last two sites of the four that were identified at the Serrano, Twin Peaks, and East Ridge locations. So those cameras that overlook part of the Weir Canyon and the fire threat zone over in East Anaheim, they are viewable now on the alertwildfire.org webpage. And they're also viewable from our Anaheim Fire and Rescue Dispatch Centers and the APU Operations Center. So we completed the installations of all four sites now, and now we continue to work with Anaheim Fire and Rescue and with the UCSD, University of California, San Diego, to identify additional sites in the future. And with that, any questions?
Any questions from members of the board? No questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Moving on to the next item. Update on water system issues, Mr. Moore.
Sure. The first thing I want to go over is our water supply dashboard. That is up on the screen, and you also have a handout. The main thing I want to notice there is we're kind of in the middle of summer right now, is our groundwater basin here locally in Orange County is looking really good. It's continuing to go up as it has the past couple of years. And also the water out in the Colorado River basin continues to go up. Also, the water, the imported water that we store through Metropolitan Water District in Lake Mead is increasing. However, the State Water Project, where we get a lot of our water, most of the imported water from, has seen a big decrease in the last year. You can see it 30% down. And our State Water Project allocation that Metropolitan Water District has is only 20% of their allocated amount. So we are seeing restrictions on that, and that's due primarily to, if you look in the lower box where it says Northern California precipitation, is the low precipitation and low snowfall we've had in Northern California this year. It's the lowest year we've had in the last 5 years. And so that has dramatically decreased the amount of storage we have. It also has required us to use more of our local storage that we have here in Diamond Valley Lake to supply Southern California. The water supply is still good. Because we had a couple wet years, we did fill up a lot of our storage accounts, and things are still looking pretty good. Any questions on our water supply conditions?
Questions?
Moving over, one thing I want to update is we often, our water meter readers and water meter technicians that maintain these meter boxes that look like this. These are typically what a residential meter box sits inside that thing. You can see there in the middle, that little hole where there's a key opening where we pull it out. And inside there, you'll see a bee's nest sometimes. And so this happens not only in water meter boxes, but it also happens in different electric equipment also. And so it's a nuisance, it's a danger to our employees. And we used to remove those, have our staff remove them themselves, but because it's dangerous, they're not all trained to do it. We decided now to use contractors. And so we had one that we ran across this month, and it required us to get our contractor out there. And here's a picture of our contractor all suited up with this special box that can kind of see to his side there as a vacuum on top of it. And he'll suck up the bees and then remove them and take them off site and remove the hive, and so that other bees can't get back in there and plug the hole. So just like you do for your house, we do run across this often, and meter boxes get calls from customers and different people to remove them. So something that we do probably a couple times a month, and something we do, like I said, for both water and electric equipment. So also want to update on going back to the Lanane Water Treatment Plant project. One of the things we do at the very end was the landscaping. And so we've installed a lot of new landscaping kind of around the water treatment plant, as you can see here. That says California Native Garden. We installed California native plants throughout the facility to just kind of, so when we do tours and we give demonstrations to different gardening people interested in planting their own landscaping, we can show them kind of what this California native drought tolerant landscaping looks like. So here's a site up by the reservoir also that we just landscaped. This is by the walking path, the perimeter road around the reservoir. This is a very popular area. We installed a couple park benches there. We moved the chain link fence in closer to the reservoir, so people that are walking around, if they want to sit in the park benches or get in the shade for a little bit, they can. So you can see the landscaping that we just planted here. You go to the next slide. This is that same area looking to the south. The plants are fairly small right now. They will grow up to be much bigger and look much nicer. But we put a new irrigation system in, new mulch. The plants, some rock features in there, and we've got a lot of good feedback from the customers. However, it looks a little too attractive. The native animals, particularly the deer, have come in there and eaten some of the plants that they like, not all of them, but some of them. So we've gone up there and replanted some of the plants that they like with plants that they don't like to eat. So kind of a learning process for us and a learning process for them. So
I do actually have a question regarding our water basin. So, Michael, I noticed we're using, it's 6% we're pumping per year of imported water into the groundwater basin, which we really can't, for the most part, touch, correct? Mostly.
How much are we pumping? Currently, we're pumping about 25 to 30% of our overall demand.
Which is off of, normally what do we pump?
Normally, we would pump closer to 80%.
Okay, so my question is, I mean, these numbers keep going up on the percent full. And at what point, I mean, what do we do with certain, I mean, are we going to continue to pump, like for example, 6% imported water, we're going to continue to pump that into the ground? Or we're going to stop that because at some point the replenishment system, groundwater replenishment system just takes over and the Santa Ana River? I mean, at what point do we not put, expensive water into the ground?
As of last January, we have not. So as of last January, so the question is for the water, replenishing the groundwater basin. Since January, when we, Anaheim, and several of our neighbors stopped pumping groundwater, they stopped putting imported water from the Colorado River into the groundwater basin. But it's a very good question.
And then what happens when you're at 100% theoretically full? Do you still
Yeah.
pump from the GWRS or what?
So what they'll do before they get to that point, the groundwater basin, once it gets full, it doesn't come out of the ground, but sometime thereafter, it will come out of the ground in certain places. So what they would do then is they would increase the allowable pumping to those other agencies such as Huntington Beach, Newport Beach. Those agencies that aren't affected by PFAS will be able to pump more groundwater.
Perfect. I know we can't do anything, but.
I will in a little bit.
Yeah, that's my next update is on the PFAS, which is our largest program that we have going on right now, is to restore those groundwater treatment plants. We've identified a program to restore our entire groundwater pumping back to 100% of our previous capacity. We're doing a lot of work on that right now, including putting together an RFP to get a contractor on board to restore some of that. Also working with our joint litigation attorneys and the city attorney's office on our litigation against to file a lawsuit. So we're going to update you next month. We're going to provide an update on our program that we have to restore the groundwater and kind of the timeline and the cost that we anticipate with that.
Perfect.
And that's all.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, update on finance issues. Mr. Billner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to have you turn your attention to our finance dashboard. I do want to provide a little context for the dashboard for this month. If you turn to the electric side of the dashboard, the purple side, you can see that our revenue for the electric division was about 5.5% below budget. That is really in alignment with what we anticipated back when we started running scenarios due to the shelter-at-home orders. However, the good news is that you can see our costs are almost 10% below budget for the year, causing us to have a net positive budget variance of about $12.5 million. On a preliminary basis through the end of the year, the accountants are still running through the numbers. We should have some final numbers around August for the fiscal year. But one interesting thing that we noticed in June for retail sales, now June retail sales for residential customers do not include any noise from pre-shelter-at-home order usage. So this shows usage from our residential customers who are at home all the time. And Mr. Braldi, this may also answer a question you posed earlier in the evening. Our residential customers used about 50% more power than we budgeted for that billing period. We billed about $9 million to our residential customers when we budgeted about $6 million to our residential customers. So, we are seeing some robust sales to our residential customers, but that also means robust receivables as well, as we talked about earlier. So it's good news, bad news. But on the commercial side, we showed about a 24% drop in sales from our industrial customers and about a 20% drop in sales from our commercial customers. Industrial customers are, of course, our largest customers, those that typically use maybe 150 megawatts in demand or more. And then our commercial customers tend to be more small, medium customers, normal retail type stores. So that kind of gives you some context what we're seeing and why you're seeing some softness in the revenue. I don't know if we can continue with the cost savings that we showed in fiscal 2020, but we'll sure try going into fiscal 2021. 2 months ago, when I prepared a presentation to you on the financial update, we did an extreme scenario where shelter-at-home orders are in place to the end of the calendar year. We may be looking more towards that scenario than the rosier scenario where we thought that the shelter-at-home orders would end June 30th. Obviously, that's not the case. So good news, bad news with this dashboard. We have a net positive budget variance of $12.5 million anticipatorily for fiscal 2020. On to water. Our sales are about 5% below budget, 4.5% below budget for water for fiscal 2020. And our costs are about 1.5% below budget. So we have a net negative budget variance of about $3 million, as you can see. We weren't able to shave any costs on the water supply for obvious reasons. We are buying more imported water that we did not budget for, and our sales are down due to temperate summer and lower commercial industrial demand. So, however, the one mitigating factor is for water right now, we do have significant reserves that we can draw from, that we plan to draw from. So we aren't in any kind of fiscal concern as it stands, because we do have fairly significant reserves. Our reserve level is higher than it's been since I started here. We have about 300 days cash or so that we plan to draw down over the next couple of years. So we're in pretty good shape considering all that's going on. I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Questions from members of the board? Hearing none, Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, power supply issues. Mr. Bowen?
Thank you, Third Chair. So turning to the power supply dashboard and the total generation chart at the top there, I wanted to draw your attention to those red bars. Those red bars are where we expected our generation to be. And anything underneath that that's white just doesn't work for me. I don't think it works for our group. We're not happy with what we see there. We'd like to see those bars, the bars going all the way up to the top of those red bars, which means that overall, we didn't generate as much as we should have. So I want to put that in some perspective for you. Our target generation was 2,395 gigawatt hours, and our actual was 2,520. So that's about a 143 gigawatt hour difference. And what that means to you when I put it into perspective is those 143 gigawatt hours that we lost, we weren't able to generate, would have generated enough power to serve 21,000 homes for a full year. So they're big numbers. They really do impact us when we look at things. So we're looking at this. My team is trying to understand exactly what we can do better in terms of forecasting for next year. As James Carver once said, it's the economy. Well, with us, it's the weather. So it's really driving a lot of the numbers that we see. And obviously with COVID, that's also starting to impact it. In terms of outages for the month of June, not many going on there at all. Kramer, as you know, have been out, and very little for Canyon. So it's been overall, we've had most of our resources up and running over the month of June. I'll talk a little bit more about renewable generation later, but just now, for now, know that we are running below forecast with that. Conventional generation, again, this is one of those places where, like I said, we are not generating enough. We're way below our forecast for total generation, which we need to look at more carefully. Wholesale market purchases. When you look at wholesale market purchases, we buy energy only when it's cheaper to do so than generating ourselves. And we did not expect to spend or to purchase so much energy as we have. Although it's at a lower price, which is good, it impacts us in other ways because it means we can't sell. So overall here, we purchased enough energy, 111 gigawatt hours, to provide energy for homes. Again, 16,000 homes for over a year. So overall, we're not happy with the purchases. We want less, we want more sales, but we have to see what happens in the next upcoming year. So wholesale sales, again, as you can see, lots of white underneath here. Again, we're not hitting our targets, especially in January and February. Really didn't hit where we're supposed to be, and primarily that's because of Kramer being out as well, but other outages have taken place during that period of time. And also, if you look at the pricing underneath on that chart, you'll see that the prices for 2020, fiscal year 2020, was a lot lower than that of fiscal year 19, which doesn't help us a lot either. So overall, we really need to take a look at how best to manage what we're going to be seeing coming up in the next 6 months, especially in the summer months when we expect to really hit our peak and be selling a lot of energy. With regards to renewables, as I said earlier, we're a little bit below forecast, but overall, 3% is not bad considering the generation that we're talking about here. So it's biofuel, it's wind, and it's solar. And as you know, wind and solar are really highly variable. So to me, the 3% target below is not too bad for us overall. So I'm pleased with that number. When you talk about the average cost for resources, again, this is where it really shows up, right? The California ISO market prices are all the way to the left. That is what we're buying power at, but the converse flip of that is we're selling energy. We're not able to sell it at those prices, or if we do sell it, our renewable resources, that's what we sell it for. So we don't get a lot of value when we sell at those prices. So overall, mixed bag, if you like. Great for cheap energy in the market when we need it, but not so good for utilities and our assets and contracts to recover costs. This year with COVID-19, it's going to be challenging, I think. And that's why we have my team looking forward to actually figuring out how we can become more creative with ways to save with our resources as well. So very challenging year ahead, but we hope to meet those challenges. With that, I'll answer any questions you might have with regards to the power supply dashboard.
Any questions from members of the board? Hearing none, seeing none. Thank you. Update on the enterprise risk and compliance.
Graham, did you have anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Graham.
Ms. Lehman?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I have several items that I'd like to brief you on today. The first is the energy risk management report that's in your packet. This confirms that all wholesale energy transactions for the first quarter of the year were within the program requirements and there's been no violations. During this period, the wholesale energy risk management program was revised to address changing market conditions. And it just so happened that our risk management program was selected by the California ISO for a random audit. And so we received a random audit of this new program at the first of the year. The audit went well, there were no findings, and it met all of the requirements. That's very good news. Also in your packet is the internal compliance report. And again, all items were in compliance. There were no violations during this period. And a few highlights include that I just want to let you know we've implemented a number of COVID protection measures, including providing about 14 wellness stations throughout the department at different facilities. Really emphasize training on protective measures and providing personal protective equipment. Also, the water services conducted a vulnerability assessment of the water system during this period, and they'll be developing the required EPA report in September. Kudos to them for doing that. On the legislative side, wow, this has been an interesting year. While the legislature was in session, most of the focus turned obviously to COVID as well as to social justice issues. There are still several utility bills that are working through the process. However, most of the more onerous bills have dropped. And so we are working and focusing on those bills that remain, but they're nothing like we've seen in years past. I also too want to mention May 1st, the presidential order on securing the U.S. bulk power system has generated efforts throughout the industry, including with Anaheim, to ensure that our system is secure from foreign adversary supply chain risks. So just to let you know, behind the scenes, we are taking careful efforts to look at what those impacts may be, if any, to our system, and we're working with government entities to address those. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Are there any questions? Members of the board? Seeing and hearing none? Thank you. Next item is items by secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are trying this rotation program where we're trying to allow some board members into the meeting. And we heard that there may be some other board members who would like to come in. So what we'd like to do is maybe rotate and let others have a chance to come in. So Peggy will reach out ahead of the next meeting and see who's interested and then try to rotate folks in. So we allow a certain amount without overwhelming the room. Planned items for next month, Michael mentioned we will have a presentation and an update on the groundwater treatment projects. We'll have the next version of utility success indicators. We have some electric pre-qualified consulting services. So every 3 years we renew that program. And so Janet will be bringing that item forward. We're working on an amendment for an agreement that we have with the Orange County Sanitation District. We're doing a big project on State College. We're having some of our water mains replaced as they go. And so we do need a change order related to some additional work that they're doing on our behalf. Some additional updates that I have, I just wanted to report to the board that our Anaheim West Tower, the first floor is open to customers currently. That may change depending on what happens with statewide or county specific orders. Right now we're seeing between 30 and 50 or so customers a day. Kind of depends. Mondays typically are very high volume days because over the weekend people come in and there's still people who want to pay cash. Still people who want to come in and see a face as opposed to do it online. And so we do have the plexiglass up, we have social distancing stations, and we have security as well, helping us with crowd control and those types of things. So it's working out very well and we'll continue it for as long as we can. I do want to report that we do have 3 utility employees who have contracted coronavirus. 2 are back at work and they have healed. 1 is still off, but is not hospitalized. And so, it's affecting the city certainly. While we don't have people who are interfacing in the same way that police officers or firefighters are engaged as frequently in terms of the customer interactions, But we do have some, and so it's always incumbent on our employees to remain safe both on their personal lives as well as at work. But glad to report that everybody is recovering or has recovered. I do want to also report that the board is aware that there is a ongoing litigation related to the general fund transfer. So that ongoing litigation is being handled by the city attorney's office, and Allison is heavily involved with that. As part of that, there's a certification process that requires that a notice go out to the public who's affected by this. So there will be a postcard that basically describes what this is. And that may drive questions that you may have, questions from customers. And so we're gearing up our call center to be able to address those questions. If you have any questions, any member of the board has questions about this, would like more information, because it's not a utility specific issue, it's really a city issue. What I would suggest is asking Allison offline, you know, what does this mean? I saw this postcard, those types of things. I was asked this question. If you could direct those directly to Allison, and if you don't have her information, then please work with Peggy, and Allison can help answer any of those questions. But I don't plan on agendizing that at the PUB because it's not really a utility specific issue. Last thing I have is we do a Business Insider newsletter. And so, of course, with everything going on right now, businesses want to know what kind of services, programs do we still offer, efficiency rebates. And so we put out a email earlier this month. And so I'm going to work with Peggy to forward it to the board so you can see what our communications are with our businesses. In this last version, we talked about opening back up. If you're opening your business, you might want to flush your water system. That's something that people might not think about. But if you haven't used your water system in about 3 or 4 months, you can have stagnant water there. That's not good. So we give some tips on that. Small business assistance, wildfire safety, solar programs, and water quality. So we'll forward that the newsletter so you can see how we communicate with businesses. And that's all I have, sir.
Thank you. At this time, items by board members. Member Gaona?
Nothing.
Member Bala?
You said no.
He shook his head.
Is that-
Member Abdul-Rahman?
Yes, I just kind of like thank you all. This is we get very good information, very informative meetings, and it appears to me Anaheim is under good care. Thank you for a good job. Thanks.
Thank you.
Member Baroldi?
That's good to see everyone. And let's hope that some of the social distancing requirements are relaxed a little bit in a month so we can have more people in the meeting.
Vice Chair Seymour?
I have nothing to add.
Nothing. And for my part, I had a death in the family. My father passed away. And thank you for the staff that kind words and kind thoughts at this card. It means a lot. The way this has been long enough in this part of this team, and you feel like family here. Spend a lot of time together, do a lot of good things together. And so this was really, really very welcome. Thank you. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn made by Vice Chair Seymour. Can I get a
I'll
second?
second that motion.
Second by Member Baroldi. Can we have a roll call vote?
This is a roll call vote for item number 12. Board Member Guyona,
Aye.
oh, I apologize. This is a roll call vote for item number 16. Board Member Guyona,
Aye.
Board Member Bala,
Aye.
There we go.
Board Member Abdul-Rahman,
Aye.
Board Member Baraldi,
Aye.
Vice Chair Seymour,
Aye.
Chair Madrano.
Aye.
The vote is 6 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent, not present, meeting adjourned.
Adjourn.